She was invisible to the world. A waitress by day, an office cleaner by night, drowning in a debt that wasn't hers. She thought the safest place to rest her eyes for just 5 minutes was the corner of the CEO's locked office, a room no one ever entered after midnight. She was wrong. She didn't just fall asleep in an office. She trespassed into the den of Dante Moretti, the city's most feared predator. When she woke up, she wasn't fired. She was owned. But what happens when the monster in the suit decides that the girl on the floor is the only thing worth saving? The silence on the 45th floor of the Moretti Global building was not peaceful. It was heavy, like the pressure before a thunderstorm. It was 2:15 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday in Chicago. The city lights below were nothing but blurred streaks of gold and crimson against the downpour. But up here, in the sterile, temperature-controlled air, the only sound was the squeak of rubber soles on polished marble. Tessa Reynolds suppressed a yawn that threatened to crack her jaw. Her body felt like it was filled with lead. She had finished her shift at Ruby's Diner at 9:00 p.m., barely catching the bus to make it to her second job as part of the nightshade cleaning crew. It was a ghost shift, cleaning the offices of men who made more money in a second than she would see in a lifetime. She pushed her cleaning cart toward the double mahogany doors at the end of the hall. The CEO's office. The rumor mill among the cleaning staff was terrified of this room. Mr. Moretti. No one called him by his first name. They said he was a ghost. They said he fired a previous cleaner just for leaving a streak on the glass overlooking Lake Michigan. Some whispered he wasn't just a businessman, that the shipping containers Moretti Global moved weren't always filled with electronics or textiles. Tessa didn't care about the rumors. She only cared about the envelope in her back pocket, a final notice from the bank. Her late father's gambling debt had become her inheritance. $30,000. If she didn't come up with $5,000 by Friday, they were taking the house. The house where her younger sister Sophie finally felt safe. She swiped her keycard. The lock clicked with a heavy, expensive thud. The office was massive. It smelled of aged leather, teakwood, and something sharp, like gun oil and expensive cologne. One wall was entirely glass, exposing the stormy city. In the center sat a desk that looked more like a fortress. Just the trash and the carpet, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling in the vast room. She emptied the heavy brass bin, mostly shredded paper. She vacuumed the pristine rug. But as she bent down to pick up a stray staple near the leather sofa in the corner, a wave of dizziness hit her so hard she stumbled. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. "Just a second," she murmured. "Just 5 minutes." It was a terrible idea. It was a fireable offense. But the leather sofa looked softer than anything she had ever touched. Tessa sat down, just to steady her spinning head. She curled her legs up, intending to close her eyes for a 10 count. The exhaustion was a tidal wave. The moment her head touched the armrest, the world went black. She didn't hear the private elevator ding 20 minutes later. She didn't hear the heavy, rhythmic footsteps of Italian leather shoes crossing the marble floor. She didn't hear the quiet, dangerous click of the door locking from the inside. Dante Moretti loosened his tie as he walked into his sanctuary. He was covered in unseen filth. The meeting at the warehouse in the South Side had gone south. A rival family, the Russos, had tried to intercept a shipment. Dante had handled it, personally. His knuckles were bruised, and his patience was non-existent. He wanted whiskey. He wanted silence. He poured a glass of amber liquid from the crystal decanter, his grey eyes scanning the room for anything out of place. He was a man who noticed everything. A pen moved an inch, a file slightly askew. His eyes stopped at the corner of the room. Dante didn't move. He didn't breathe. His hand hovered over the concealed Glock 19, strapped beneath his suit jacket. There was a lump on his sofa. A person. He moved silently. A predator stalking prey, the whiskey glass forgotten on the desk. He expected an assassin, a spy, a corporate saboteur sent by the competition. He rounded the corner of the desk and stopped. It wasn't a hitman. It was a girl. A girl in a shapeless grey uniform, 2 sizes too big, wearing worn-out sneakers that had seen better years, let alone days. Her hair, a messy chestnut tangle, had fallen out of its bun and fanned across his Italian leather. She was asleep. Deeply, dangerously asleep. Dante stared. The audacity. In his world, people trembled when he walked into a room. Senators checked their tones when speaking to him. And here was this mouse, drooling slightly on a couch that cost more than her annual salary. He should call security. He should have her dragged out and thrown onto the street. But then he saw it. The envelope. It had slipped halfway out of her back pocket as she shifted in her sleep. The red stamp was visible even in the dim light. Final notice. Foreclosure pending. Dante reached out, his movements precise, and plucked the letter from her pocket without waking her. He read it in the moonlight. Tessa Reynolds. Debt $32,400. Immediate payment required, $5,000. He looked back at her face. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, visible even in sleep. She wasn't an assassin. She was desperate. A cruel smirk touched Dante's lips. He didn't do charity, but he did do leverage. And right now, he needed a solution to a very specific problem that had arisen during tonight's botched meeting. He sat on the coffee table directly in front of her, leaned forward, and slammed his hand down on the leather cushion next to her head. Tessa woke up with a scream that died in her throat. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The room was dark, illuminated only by the lightning flashing outside and the terrifyingly calm grey eyes staring directly into hers. She scrambled backward, jamming her spine against the arm of the sofa, her hands trembling. I'm sorry, I didn't. I was just—" Her breath came in, short, panicked gasps. The man sitting in front of her was terrifying. He was beautiful in a sharp, painful way, like a knife edge. His suit was immaculate, but his energy was chaotic and violent. "You're drooling on my Chesterfield," Dante said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth but scraping against her nerves. Tessa wiped her mouth frantically, her face burning. "Mr. Moretti, I felt dizzy. I'm so sorry. I'll leave. Please don't report me. I need this job." "You need this job?" Dante held up the crumpled letter. Tessa froze. The blood drained from her face. She snatched at the air, but he pulled it back effortlessly. "That's private," she whispered, shame flooding her chest. "Nothing in my office is private, Miss Reynolds," Dante read from the paper. $30,000. Gambling debt? No. Looking at your shoes, you don't gamble. Inherited? Tessa didn't answer. She swung her legs off the couch, grabbing her cleaning cart. "I'm leaving. You can fire me. Just give me the letter." "Sit down," Dante commanded. It wasn't a shout. It was a quiet order, enforced by years of people obeying him without question. Tessa's knees buckled, and she sank back onto the sofa. Dante stood up and walked to his desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a checkbook. "How much do you make a year, Tessa?" Barely 20, she stammered, confused by the shift in his tone. "And you work 2 jobs, waitress at Ruby's, cleaner here." He looked at her, analyzing her like a spreadsheet. "You're exhausted, you're desperate, and you're invisible. No one looks at the cleaning lady, do they?" "What do you want?" Tessa asked, her fear morphing into defensiveness. Dante ripped a check from the book and walked back to her. He held it out. Tessa looked at the number. $5,000, the exact amount she needed to save the house this week. "Is this severance?" she asked, tears pricking her eyes. "Hush money?" "It's a down payment," Dante said, his eyes locking onto hers. "You need money. I need a ghost." Tessa frowned. "I don't understand." "My last personal assistant was found selling my schedule to a competitor," Dante said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "I can't trust anyone in my circle. I need someone from the outside, someone who needs me more than they need to betray me, someone who owes me." He waved the check. "I will pay off your father's entire debt, the full 30,000, plus a salary of 10,000 a month." Tessa stopped breathing. That was impossible money. It was freedom. It was safety for Sophie. "And what do I have to do?" Dante smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Everything I say. You quit the diner, you quit the cleaning crew. You move into the penthouse suite at the plaza, under my name, starting tonight. You will be my personal assistant, my shadow. You will carry my phones, organize my life, and attend events on my arm when I need a distraction." "That sounds fake," Tessa whispered. "Why would you pay that much for an assistant?" "Because," Dante leaned in, his face inches from hers, and she could smell the expensive whiskey on his breath. "The job comes with a hazard warning. You will see things, Tessa, illegal things, dangerous things, and if you ever speak a word of it to anyone, the police, your sister, a priest, the deal is void, and I will collect the debt. With interest." The thunder clapped outside, shaking the glass walls. Tessa looked at the check. She thought of her sister, Sophie, who wanted to go to art school, but was currently working at a grocery store to help pay the bills. She thought of the loan sharks who had started parking their black sedan outside their house last week. She looked at Dante Moretti. He was the devil offering her a glass of water in hell. "Do I have a choice?" she asked softly. Dante checked his watch, a platinum Patek Philippe. "You have 30 seconds before I call security. Have you arrested for trespassing and blacklist you from every job in Chicago, or you take the check and you belong to me." Tessa's hand trembled as she reached out. Her fingers brushed against his, and she felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with the storm. She took the check. "Good girl," Dante said, darker now. "Go home, pack a bag. A driver will be at your apartment at 6 a.m. Don't be late." He turned his back on her, dismissing her as if she were nothing more than a signed contract. Tessa grabbed her cart and fled the room, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had saved her house. She had saved her sister. But as the elevator doors closed, blocking out the sight of Dante Moretti standing alone in his tower, she realized she had just sold her soul. She just didn't realize that the danger wasn't only from the illegal things she would see. The real danger was that for the first time in years, Dante Moretti had looked at a woman and felt something other than indifference, and he didn't like losing control. As Tessa ran out of the building into the pouring rain, a black SUV sat parked across the street. The window rolled down halfway. A man with a scar running through his eyebrow watched her leave. He picked up his phone. "Moretti has a new pet," the man said into the receiver. "Find out who she is. She might be the weak spot we've been looking for." The rain had stopped by the time the sun bled into the grey Chicago skyline, but the storm inside Tessa's stomach was just beginning. She stood in the small living room of her crumbling apartment in Humboldt Park, staring at her younger sister, Sophie. Sophie was eating cereal, blissfully unaware that their lives had fundamentally shifted on its axis in the last 8 hours. "You're quitting both jobs?" Sophie asked, the spoon hovering halfway to her mouth. "Tess, are you serious? We barely made rent last month. If Mum and Dad were here—" "They aren't." Tessa cut her off, sharper than she intended. She softened her voice, reaching out to touch Sophie's shoulder. "I got a promotion, a real one. Executive assistant to a CEO downtown. It's a live-in position. High security. That's why the pay is so good." She placed the bank receipt on the table. The debt was gone. Paid in full at 4 a.m. via an online transfer that Dante Moretti had forced her to execute on his encrypted tablet before she left his office. Sophie's eyes widened. "Tessa, this is... how?" "Don't ask questions, Soph. Just focus on your art portfolio. I'll send money every week, but I have to go. Now." A heavy honk from the street below made the windows rattle. Tessa looked out. The black SUV was there, looking like a sleek shark in a sea of rusted sedans. She grabbed her single duffel bag. It contained 2 pairs of jeans, 3 t-shirts, her toothbrush, and a photo of her parents. It was everything she owned. "Be safe," Sophie whispered, sensing the tension radiating off her sister. "I will," Tessa lied. She walked down the 3 flights of stairs, her heart pounding. When she pushed open the front door of the building, a man was waiting. He was built like a refrigerator, wearing a suit that strained against his biceps. "Miss Reynolds?" the man grunted. He didn't ask. He stated, "I am Bruno. Mr. Moretti sent me." He took her bag before she could offer it and opened the back door. The interior of the car smelled of new leather and mint. Tessa slid in, expecting to see Dante, but the back seat was empty. "Where is he?" she asked, as Bruno merged into traffic, cutting off a taxi with aggressive ease. "Mr. Moretti is busy," Bruno said, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. His gaze was cold, assessing. "I am taking you to the holding." "The holding?" Tessa swallowed hard. "You mean the apartment?" Bruno didn't answer. He just turned up the radio. Classical music filled the car, Vivaldi, which felt jarringly elegant against the blurred graffiti of the passing streets. They drove for 20 minutes, moving from the grit of the outskirts to the gleaming steel canyons of the loop. The car pulled up to a private underground entrance of a glass spire that pierced the clouds. The Obsidian Tower. Bruno escorted her up a private elevator that had no buttons, just a retinal scanner. When the doors opened, Tessa gasped. The penthouse was larger than her entire apartment building. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture, floor-to-ceiling windows, black marble floors, and furniture that looked like art exhibits. But it was cold. There were no photos, no clutter, no sign of life. "Your room is the second door on the left," Bruno said. "Mr. Moretti will return at 6. He expects you to be ready." "Ready for what?" "Dinner. The gala at the Art Institute." Bruno pointed to a large, glossy black box sitting on the dining table. "Open it." Bruno turned and left, the elevator swallowing him whole. Tessa was alone in the sky. She walked over to the table and lifted the lid of the box. Inside, nestled in layers of silk tissue, was a dress. It was a deep, blood-red velvet, strapless and floor-length, with a slit that went dangerously high up the thigh. Beside it lay a pair of black stilettos with red soles, Christian Louboutin, and a diamond choker that looked heavy enough to sink a boat. There was a note, handwritten in sharp, angular script. "Burn the jeans. Tonight you are not a waitress. You are mine. Do not disappoint me." D. Tessa felt a flash of anger. He was treating her like a doll, a prop. She looked around the pristine apartment, searching for a place to put her duffel bag. She opened the closet in the guest room, and her breath hitched. It wasn't empty. Hanging in the back, behind a row of empty hangers, was a grey suit jacket. It looked like Dante's. Tessa reached out to move it, but as she shifted the fabric, something heavy clattered to the floor of the closet. She froze. It was a holster. and inside it was a gun. A black, semi-automatic pistol, cold to the touch. Tessa backed away, her hands trembling. She had known he was dangerous. She had known he was powerful. But seeing the weapon, carelessly left in the room he had assigned to her, made it real. She wasn't just working for a corporate shark. She was living with a wolf. She heard the front door chime. It wasn't a doorbell. It was the elevator arriving. Tessa scrambled to pick up the gun, shoving it back onto the shelf and slamming the closet door, just as Dante Moretti walked into the living room. He looked different than the night before. He was wearing a navy suit, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the tanned skin of his throat. He looked tired, but his eyes were electric as they landed on her. "You're not dressed," he said, his voice flat. I just got here," Tessa stammered, crossing her arms over her chest, trying to hide her shaking hands. "Mr. Moretti, I need to know. What exactly am I walking into? I saw." Dante stopped moving. He turned his head slowly, his gaze pinning her to the spot. "What did you see, Tessa?" She couldn't say it. She couldn't say, "I saw your gun." "I saw the dress," she lied, her voice barely a whisper. "It's too much. I can't wear this. People will stare." Dante closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He stopped inches from her, his scent, sandalwood and danger enveloping her. He reached out, his fingers grazing her chin, tilting her head up until she was forced to look into his storm's grey eyes. "That is the point, tesoro," he whispered, using an Italian endearment that sounded more like a threat. "I want them to stare at you. Because if they are staring at you, they aren't looking at my hands, and they certainly aren't looking at the knife in my back." He dropped his hand. "Put the dress on. You have 20 minutes. If you make us late, I add another 5,000 to your debt." Tessa watched him walk toward his own suite. She realized then that the golden cage wasn't just a metaphor. He had bought her to be his shield, and she had no idea who was aiming at him. The charity gala was held in the modern wing of the Art Institute of Chicago. The air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and deceit. Tessa felt naked. The red velvet dress fit her like a second skin, clinging to every curve. The diamond choker felt cold against her throat, a constant reminder of her ownership. She had pinned her hair up, exposing her neck, just as Dante had instructed. "Walk slightly behind me," Dante murmured as they stepped out of the limousine. The flashes of paparazzi cameras blinded her for a second. "Smile. You are happy. You are adoring. You are fascinated by everything I say." "I feel like I'm going to throw up," Tessa muttered through her teeth, keeping a plastic smile plastered on her face. "Don't," Dante said, waving to a senator. "Dry cleaning velvet is a nightmare." He placed a hand on the small of her back. The heat of his palm burned through the fabric. It was possessive, firm, guiding her through the shark tank. Inside, the room was filled with Chicago's elite, bankers, politicians, real estate tycoons. But Tessa noticed something else. There were men in the corners who didn't fit, men with scars, men with suits that were too tight across the shoulders, men who watched the doors instead of the art. "Dante!" A booming voice cut through the crowd. A man with silver hair and a face like a bulldog approached them. He was holding a glass of scotch and smiling, but his eyes were dead. "Moretti, I didn't think you'd show your face after the logistics issue in the South Side last night." Dante's hand tightened on Tessa's waist, just a fraction. Painful, but grounding. "Victor," Dante nodded, his voice smooth as silk. "Minor delays. It's all been handled. The shipment arrived this morning." "Shipment?" Tessa kept her face neutral, but her mind raced. Were they talking about the illegal things Dante had warned her about? Victor Russo's eyes slid from Dante to Tessa. He looked her up and down, a slow, lecherous slide that made her skin crawl. And who is this? Victor stepped closer, invading her personal space. I didn't know you had a new toy, Dante. The last one didn't last very long, did she? A tragic car accident, wasn't it? Tessa felt the blood drain from her face. Car accident? This is Tessa, Dante said, stepping slightly in front of her, blocking Victor's view. His voice dropped, losing its polite veneer. And she is not a toy, Victor. She is my associate, and you are standing too close. The air between the two men crackled with violence. The music seemed to fade away. Tessa saw Bruno, standing by the bar, unbutton his jacket, his hand hovering near his hip. Victor laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Touchy, touchy. Just looking, Dante. She's a pretty thing. A waitress, right? I think I've seen her at Ruby's, serving pie. Tessa froze. How did he know? Dante didn't flinch. She was a waitress. Now she runs my calendar. And if you speak to her again without my permission, Victor, I will buy every property on your block and evict your mother. Enjoy the party. Dante steered Tessa away, his grip iron hard. He didn't stop until they were in a secluded alcove near a sculpture of a headless torso. He knows who I am, Tessa whispered, panic rising in her chest. He knows I worked at Ruby's. How does he know? Dante looked down at her. For the first time, the mask of the cold CEO slipped. There was genuine concern in his eyes, mixed with a dark fury. Because I am watched, Tessa, which means you are watched. He reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was surprisingly gentle. Victor Russo is a pig. He tries to intimidate. He feeds on fear. Do not let him see you bleed. You said his last assistant died in a car accident, Tessa accused, her voice shaking. You didn't tell me that. It wasn't an accident, Dante said flatly, and I won't let that happen to you. You are under my protection now. That means something. Does it? Tessa challenged, because it feels like you just painted a target on my back. I did, Dante admitted, leaning in close, his lips brushing her ear. But I am the only one allowed to shoot. Remember that. Before Tessa could respond, a waiter passed by with a tray of champagne. Dante grabbed 2 glasses, handed one to her, and turned her around to face the room. Drink, he ordered. We have to mingle. And Tessa? Yes. If Russo approaches you again, you don't look down. You look him in the eye. If he touches you, you break his finger. I'll pay the legal fees. Tessa took a gulp of the champagne. It tasted like fear and money. The night wore on. Tessa played her part. She laughed at jokes she didn't understand. She nodded when men spoke about stocks, and she avoided Victor Russo's gaze. But she could feel eyes on her constantly. Not just Russo. Near the bathroom, a woman in a silver dress bumped into her. It looked accidental, but the woman grabbed Tessa's arm with a grip like a vice. "Get out!" the woman hissed into her ear. She was older, elegant, but her eyes were terrified. He doesn't love you. He doesn't protect anyone. Get out before the debt comes due. Who are you? Tessa pulled back. I'm his aunt, the woman whispered, and I know what he plans to do with you. You're not the assistant, honey. You're the bait. The woman disappeared into the crowd before Tessa could say another word. Tessa stood frozen in the hallway. Bait. The word echoed in her mind. Bait for what? For Russo? For the police? She turned to find Dante, to demand answers, but the ballroom lights suddenly flickered. A low murmur went through the crowd. Dante was across the room, talking to the mayor. But he wasn't looking at the politician. He was looking at the balcony doors. They were opening. 3 men in masks walked in. They weren't carrying trays, they were carrying assault rifles. "Everybody down!" one of the gunmen screamed. Chaos erupted. Screams shattered the elegant atmosphere. Glass shattered. Tessa dropped to the floor, her hands over her head, her heart hammering against the marble. She looked through the forest of legs and overturned tables. She saw Dante. He hadn't dropped. He was standing still, calm amidst the panic. He reached into his jacket. Tessa saw Bruno tackle one gunman. She saw Dante raise his arm, the glint of metal in his hand. Bang! Bang! 2 shots. Precise. Controlled. The 2 other gunmen dropped before they could even lift their rifles. Silence fell over the room, heavier than the screams. Dante Moretti lowered his gun. He scanned the room, his eyes hunting. When they found Tessa, crouching near a pillar, he moved. He didn't run. He strode through the chaos like a god of war. He hauled her up by her arm, pulling her against his chest. His heart wasn't even racing. "We're leaving," he said, his voice ice cold. You just killed them," Tessa gasped, looking at the bodies. "They were Russo's men," Dante said, holstering his weapon as sirens began to wail in the distance. "And they were aiming for you." Tessa looked at him, horror washing over her. The aunt was right. She was the bait. And the trap had just snapped shut. The drive away from the Art Institute was a blur of neon lights and terrifying speed. Dante drove the stolen sedan himself, having abandoned the limo, weaving through traffic with a cold, surgical precision that was almost more frightening than the recklessness would have been. Tessa sat in the passenger seat, her arms wrapped around herself, shivering violently. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hollow shock. She could still smell the gunpowder. She could still see the way the 2 men had dropped, sacks of meat, no longer human, when Dante pulled the trigger. "Stop shaking," Dante commanded, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "I can't," Tessa's teeth chattered. You killed them, just like that." "They were going to kill you, Tessa. Would you prefer they succeeded?" "You used me as bait," she screamed, the anger finally piercing through the shock. She turned to him, ignoring the speedometer climbing past 90. "That woman, your aunt, she told me. You brought me there because you knew they would come. You painted a target on me so you could draw them out." Dante didn't deny it. He didn't even blink. He took a sharp right turn, the tires screeching, heading toward the industrial district instead of the penthouse. "Yes," he said simply. The confirmation hit her harder than a slap. "I'm a person, Dante. I have a sister. I'm not just a piece of meat you can throw to the wolves." "You are alive," Dante growled, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "And your sister is safe. Her debt is paid. Her house is secure. That is the trade, Tessa. You sold me your life. I decide how to spend it." Tessa slumped back against the seat, tears streaming down her face. She hated him. She hated him more than the poverty she had escaped. He was a monster in a 3-piece suit. They pulled into an abandoned warehouse near the docks. The heavy metal shutters rolled up automatically as they approached, and Dante drove the car inside. The moment the engine cut, the silence was deafening. "Get out," he said. Tessa fumbled with the door handle, her fingers numb. Dante was there instantly, opening the door and offering a hand. She slapped it away and stumbled out on her own, nearly tripping over the hem of the red velvet dress. "Don't touch me," she hissed. Dante withdrew his hand, his jaw tightening. "We are staying here tonight. The penthouse is compromised. Russo has a mole in my security detail. Until I find out who it is, we are underground." The safe house was a loft built into the upper rafters of the warehouse. It was stark, industrial, and filled with monitors showing camera feeds of the entire city. Dante threw his jacket on a chair and unbuttoned his cuffs, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He went to a medical kit on the wall. "Come here," he ordered. "I'm not injured," Tessa said, standing by the door, hugging her arms. "You have glass in your hair, and you're bleeding." Tessa touched her shoulder. Her fingers came away red. A shard of a champagne flute must have grazed her when she hit the floor. She hadn't even felt it. "Sit!" Dante pointed to a stool. Defeated, Tessa sat. Dante moved behind her. She flinched as he reached out, but his touch was surprisingly clinical. He used tweezers to pull a small shard of glass from her shoulder, then cleaned the wound with an antiseptic wipe. The sting made her hiss. "Why?" she asked softly, looking at the floor. "Why me? Why not just hire a professional bodyguard to pretend to be your girlfriend?" Dante paused. His hands rested on her bare shoulders for a moment longer than necessary. "Because Russo knows I don't care about professionals," Dante said, his voice low, vibrating against her back. "He knows I view soldiers as expendable. To lure him out, I needed him to believe I had found something precious, something innocent. Russo believes that every man has a weakness, a soft spot for beauty and purity. You were the perfect lie." "A lie," Tessa repeated bitterly. "So you pretended to care." "I pretended to possess," Dante corrected. He bandaged the cut. But the lie worked too well. Russo didn't just send a hit squad, he sent his best men. He thinks you are the key to breaking me. He walked around to face her. He looked exhausted, the shadows under his eyes stark. "You said your aunt warned you," Dante said. "Which aunt?" "She had silver hair. Elegant. She wore a diamond brooch shaped like a swan." Dante went still. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a statue. "Julia," he whispered. "She said she was your aunt." "Is she?" "She was," Dante said, his voice void of emotion. "She died 4 years ago, or so I was told. We buried an empty casket." Tessa's eyes widened. She's a ghost?" "No, she's a traitor." Dante's eyes hardened into steel. "If Julia is alive, and she is at that party, it means she is the one working with Russo. She is the one who sold out the family." He turned away, pacing the room. "She faked her death to escape the life, or so I thought. But if she is back, Tessa, you are in more danger than I thought." "Great," Tessa muttered, fear spiking again. "So the ghost aunt wants me dead too?" "No." Dante stopped pacing. He looked at Tessa, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself. "Julia doesn't want to kill you. She wants to take you. She knows that if she takes you, she can trade you for the shipping routes." "But I'm just a lie," Tessa said, confused. "You said it yourself. You don't actually care. If they take me, you can just let me go. You don't have to trade anything." Dante looked at her. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. He looked at her wild hair, her tear-stained face, the red dress that was ruined by blood and glass. He looked at the defiance in her chin. "Yes," Dante said softly, almost to himself. "That was the plan. If you were taken, you were collateral damage. Acceptable loss." "So what changed?" Tessa challenged. Dante walked closer, crowding her space until her back hit the counter. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. His skin was rough, calloused from gun grips and violence. "What changed," Dante murmured, "is that when those men walked in, my first thought wasn't about the operation. It wasn't about killing them. My first thought was her." Tessa's breath hitched. She stared up at him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. "You are a complication, Tessa Reynolds," Dante whispered, his face inches from hers. A dangerous, inconvenient complication. He looked like he was going to kiss her. Tessa found herself leaning in, drawn by the magnetic pull of his darkness. But then he pulled back abruptly, the mask slamming back into place. "Get some sleep," he ordered, walking toward the monitors. "We move at dawn. I'm going to finish this war tomorrow." Tessa watched him go, her skin burning where he had touched her. She realized with terrified clarity that she wasn't just a hostage anymore, and he wasn't just a captor. The next 48 hours were a suffocating mix of boredom and terror. They stayed in the warehouse. Dante spent hours on encrypted calls, shouting in Italian, organizing what sounded like a small army. Bruno arrived the next morning, looking grim, bringing food and tactical gear. Tessa stayed out of the way. She found an old radio in the corner and listened to the news. The shooting at the gala was being reported as a gang-related incident. No names were mentioned. It was as if she didn't exist. By the evening of the second day, the atmosphere in the warehouse shifted. Dante was gearing up. He put on a Kevlar vest beneath a black tactical turtleneck. He strapped a knife to his ankle and checked his gun, a larger one this time. "Where are you going?" Tessa asked. She was wearing a pair of Dante's sweatpants and a t-shirt she had found in a locker. "To end it," Dante said. "We tracked Julia. She's meeting Russo at an old shipyard in Gary, Indiana. They think I'm still hiding. I'm going to cut the head off the snake." He walked over to her. "Bruno stays here with you. 2 other men are outside. Do not open the door for anyone, not even if the building is on fire." "Dante." Tessa grabbed his arm. It was the first time she had initiated contact. If you don't come back." Dante looked at her hand on his arm. He covered it with his own. "Then the debt is void. There is a file on the computer. It contains a new identity for you and Sophie. Passports, cash, a flight to New Zealand. If I don't call by midnight, you run." Tessa felt a lump in her throat. "Come back," she whispered. Dante didn't smile, but his eyes softened. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. It was chaste, but it felt like a brand. "Lock the door," he said. And then he was gone. Tessa sat on the cot, watching the time tick by. 8 August p.m., 9 cos p.m., 10 August p.m. At 10:15 p.m., the power went out. The monitors died. The lights buzzed and faded into darkness. "Bruno!" Tessa called out, panic seizing her chest. "Stay down!" Bruno's voice roared from the lower level. "We have company!" Gunfire erupted outside. It was loud, chaotic. Tessa scrambled under the cot, pressing her hands over her ears. She heard glass breaking. She heard heavy boots on the metal stairs. "Bruno!" she screamed again. There was a sickening thud. Then silence. Tessa held her breath. She saw a flashlight beam slice through the darkness of the loft. "Tessa!" A woman's voice. Soft, urgent. Tessa peeked out. It was her, the woman from the party, Julia. She wasn't holding a gun. She was holding a flashlight and looking terrified. "Tessa, are you up here? We have to go. Dante sent me." Tessa crawled out slowly. "Dante sent you. He said you were the traitor. He said you were working with Russo." Julia shook her head frantically. "Of course he thinks that. Russo planted the evidence. Honey, listen to me. Dante walked into a trap. Russo knew he was coming. They have the shipyard rigged to blow. Dante managed to get a signal out to me. He said to get you to safety." Tessa hesitated. "Where is Bruno?" "Bruno is hurt. My men are helping him. But we have to leave now. If Russo's men find you here, they will kill you to punish Dante." Tessa's mind raced. Dante had said, "Trust no one." But he had also said he was walking into a trap. And the power cutting, the gunfire, it all felt real. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Tessa asked, backing away. Julia reached into her pocket. Tessa flinched, expecting a weapon. But Julia pulled out a phone. She held it up. It was a photo of Sophie, Tessa's sister, tied to a chair in what looked like a basement. Tessa's world stopped. A scream tore from her throat. "Russo has your sister," Julia said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Dante didn't tell you, did he? He knew. He let it happen. He used Sophie as leverage to keep you compliant." "No," Tessa sobbed. "He paid her debt. He saved her. He bought her," Julia corrected. "Just like he bought you. Come with me, Tessa. I can take you to her. We can save her. But we have to go now." Tessa looked at the dark warehouse. She looked at the photo of Sophie. Logic failed her. Fear for her sister overrode every warning Dante had given her. "Take me to her," Tessa wept. Julia smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile that Tessa didn't see in the dark. "Good girl." Tessa followed Julia down the stairs, stepping over the unconscious, or dead, body of Bruno. She got into the back of a waiting sedan. As the car sped away, Julia pulled out a burner phone. She dialed a number. "I have the package," Julia said into the phone. "Is the nephew dead?" Tessa froze. "Nephew?" "Dante." A pause. Then Julia frowned. "What do you mean he wasn't at the shipyard?" Tessa's heart hammered. It was a double cross. "Turn the car around!" Tessa screamed, lunging for the door handle. It was locked. Julia turned in the front seat, pointing a small silver pistol at Tessa's face. "Sit back, dear," Julia said, her voice entirely different now, hard, amused, cruel. "The family reunion is just beginning, and since Dante didn't show up to his own execution, we'll just have to make sure he comes to yours." Tessa sank back into the seat, looking out at the passing city. She had made a mistake, a fatal mistake. She had left the only safety she had. Meanwhile, 20 miles away. Dante Moretti stood in the center of the empty shipyard in Gary. It was quiet. Too quiet. There was no meeting, no Russo, no Julia. His phone buzzed, a single text message from an unknown number. It was a video feed. It showed Tessa, tied to a chair in a warehouse that Dante recognized immediately. It was the old meatpacking plant where his father had been murdered 20 years ago. Victor Russo walked into the frame. He put a hand on Tessa's shoulder. She was crying, a piece of duct tape over her mouth. "You're losing your touch, boy," Russo said to the camera. "You went for the head, but you left your heart unguarded." Dante stared at the screen. The phone screen cracked under the pressure of his grip. A sound escaped him, a guttural, animalistic roar of pure rage that echoed off the shipping containers. He didn't call for backup. He didn't formulate a plan. He walked back to his car, opened the trunk, and pulled out an assault rifle and a bag of grenades. They had taken her. They had touched her. Tonight, Chicago would burn, and from the ashes, only one Moretti would rise. The meatpacking plant smelled of rust and old blood. Tessa sat tied to a metal chair in the center of the kill floor, her heart thumping against her ribs like a trapped bird. Victor Russo paced in front of her, spinning his revolver. Julia sat on a crate nearby, looking bored, checking her nails. "He's not coming, Victor," Julia sighed. "He's ruthless. He cut his losses. Kill the girl and let's move on to the warehouses." "He'll come," Russo grinned, his teeth yellow, "because he's arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable." "He is," Tessa said. Her voice shook, but she forced her chin up. "And when he gets here, he's going to burn you alive." Russo laughed and raised his hand to strike her. Boom! The heavy steel doors at the far end of the plant didn't just open, they exploded inward. A cloud of debris and smoke filled the air. Russo spun around, raising his gun. His men scattered, taking cover behind machinery. From the smoke, a shadow emerged. Dante didn't run. He walked. He held an assault rifle in one hand and a detonator in the other. He looked like a demon rising from hell. His suit was gone, replaced by tactical gear, his face streaked with soot. "Kill him!" Russo screamed. 3 of Russo's men popped up to fire. Dante didn't break stride. He raised the rifle. Pop, pop, pop! 3 shots, 3 bodies hitting the floor. He moved with a terrifying fluidity, a machine of death calibrated for one purpose. Russo grabbed Tessa by her hair, hauling her up and jamming the barrel of his gun into her temple. "Stop!" Russo shrieked. "Take another step and I paint the walls with her." Dante stopped. He was 20 feet away. The rifle hung loosely at his side. His eyes were locked on Tessa. They weren't cold anymore. They were burning. "Let her go, Victor," Dante said. His voice was quiet, terrifyingly calm over the ringing in Tessa's ears. "And I'll let you die quickly." "Drop the gun!" Russo yelled, his hand shaking against Tessa's skin. "Kick it over." Dante slowly lowered the rifle to the concrete. He kicked it away. "Now get on your knees," Russo crowed, victory in his eyes. "Look at him, Julia, the great Dante Moretti, begging for a waitress." Julia stood up, aiming her small pistol at Dante. "It's over, nephew." Dante looked at Tessa. He gave her a microscopic nod. A signal. "Remember the party. If he touches you, break his finger." Tessa didn't hesitate. She couldn't break his finger, but she could do something else. She stomped her heel down with all her strength onto Russo's instep. At the same moment, she threw her head back, smashing her skull into his nose. There was a sickening crunch. Russo screamed, his grip loosening just enough. Tessa threw herself to the ground. Dante moved faster than thought. He pulled a handgun from his waistband. Bang! A single shot hit Julia in the shoulder, spinning her around. Bang! The second shot hit Russo directly in the forehead before he could even raise his weapon again. Silence crashed back into the room. Dante rushed forward, holstering his weapon and dropping to his knees beside Tessa. He pulled a knife and sliced through the ropes binding her wrists. "Tessa," he breathed, pulling her into his chest. His hands were shaking. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" "I'm okay," she sobbed, burying her face in his neck. "Sophie. Julia showed me a picture. It was fake," Dante promised, holding her tighter. "Bruno recovered. He's with Sophie right now. She's safe. They're all safe." He pulled back, framing her face with his hands. "I thought I lost you. You came for me," she whispered. "I would burn the world for you," Dante said. And then he kissed her, a desperate, searing kiss that tasted of smoke and survival. 6 months later, the office was quiet. The rain lashed against the glass of the Moretti Global building, just as it had that first night. Tessa sat on the leather sofa, reading a file. She wasn't wearing a cleaning uniform. She was wearing a tailored cream suit. The door opened. Dante walked in. He looked tired, but when he saw her, the tension left his shoulders. "The merger is complete," he said, loosening his tie. "Russo's territory is ours." "Good," Tessa said, not looking up. "I rescheduled your meeting with the senator, and Sophie got into the Art Institute. I paid her tuition this morning." Dante walked over and sat on the coffee table in front of her, mirroring the night they met. He took the file from her hands. "You're working late, Mrs. Moretti," he smirked. "Someone has to keep you in line, Mr. Moretti," she smiled, leaning forward. He kissed her, soft and lingering. The girl who had fallen asleep on the floor was gone. In her place was the Queen of Chicago, and the king would never let her go. And that is the story of how a sleeping waitress woke up to become the queen of the underworld. From a desperate debt to a dangerous love, Tessa and Dante proved that sometimes the biggest risks have the greatest rewards. What did you think of Julia's betrayal? Did you see that coming? And honestly, would you have signed that contract if you were in Tessa's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of romance and danger, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new drama every week. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.